Hey, this is Kid Ref Kris Levin, and you're listening to the best podcast, A Shot of Wrestling, on Spotify. And everywhere you get your podcast, new episodes will drop every Monday.
Are you ready? Is that the message you got? We about to go live. Are you ready to rock? So take a shot, boy. Is that the message you got? From the fans to the fans, let me hear the crowd pop. So take a shot, boy. Is that the message you got? We about to go live. Are you ready to rock? So take a shot, boy. Is that the message you got? From the fans to the fans, let me hear the crowd pop. So take a shot. Oh yeah. So take a shot. Oh, so take a shot. Oh, so take a shot.
What's up, everyone? It is me, your favorite actor, the Hollywood assassin, Marc Choen, filling in for Abel yet again. But please, everyone, give it up for the Kid Ref himself, Kris Levin. How you doing, man?
Hey, man, I'm doing very well. How about yourself?
Well, you know, quarantine life.
Yeah, making the best of it, though, right?
Oh, of course, man. I'm learning different things here. I'm interviewing people now. Taking people's
jobs.
Moving
all up in the world.
Yeah, moving up in the world, right?
What's the old saying that they always say, crisis and opportunity are the same word in Japanese, so look at you.
I dig that. I gotta make that a t-shirt or something. How have you been holding up during all of this?
You know, I've been doing mostly well. There's definitely a portion early on where I'm not someone who is very adept to sudden change, so it took me a while to get used to all of that, but I think I'm over the hump mostly now. And I'm just trying to figure things out as best I can, like we all are.
Now, I've been seeing, like, locally, there have been a few different empty arena shows, I should say. I'm not talking about WrestleMania or WWE or AEW, but, like, you know, local events. Have you participated in that at all?
Yeah, the last two events that I did before everything got put on a hard lockdown was GCW, and that was on March 20th, so a couple weeks back. We did a empty arena event from the GCW Performance Center in, I think they were saying it was El Paso, Texas or something, but it was the Voltage Lounge in Philadelphia where we typically run shows from.
Got it. Now, how was that experience working in an empty arena?
So it wasn't my first time working in an empty arena, just by virtue of the fact that you're on the indies. A lot of these shows are unintentionally empty arena events.
Of course.
But like I had done studio tapings before through Beyond and places like that. It's a different sort of feeling. It takes a lot for a performer to be able to turn it on and go 100% when you don't have that frenetic energy that a crowd provides, you know. But those events were something special because I think it was that Wednesday where everything went weird all of a sudden. Like everything was building and like we knew there was a thing that was happening. But we didn't realize, at least I didn't, and I think a lot of us didn't, realize how much this was going to affect us. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden that Wednesday hits, and like in the middle of that AEW NXT time slot, all of a sudden you're seeing events are shutting down and leagues are canceling and Tom Hanks has coronavirus and everything just became very real very suddenly.
Once Tom Hanks got it, that's when America was just like, all right, that's it.
Yeah. That's our closest thing to Santa Claus or, you know, whatever religious deity you may pick. That's Tom Hanks for us.
Right.
Ever since Mr. Rogers passed, at least. And yeah, like once it became very real, we all of a sudden were faced with the prospect of life may not continue on like we thought it would be because a lot of us really didn't think there would be any interruptions at all. And within like a matter of hours, we kind of put together the whole, okay, so GCW, we're going to throw together this last-minute series of events. It was twofold. They put up a GoFundMe to collect donations to pay the wrestlers and all the performers that day. And it was also to give something back to the fans so that we all had something to rally together. And Brett Lauderdale, the promoter, he gave an awesome speech talking about how we were the last ones left because at that point, every event was getting shut down. And it was a big emotional bonding experience. I mean, the GCW locker room already, as is pretty tightly knit. Like you'll see a lot of people talk about pro wrestling as a brotherhood, and that's not always the reality. And I think in GCW it is. It's a lot of people looking out for each other, everyone wanting the best from one another, and just knowing like, hey, we're kind of the violinists at the on the Titanic going down the ship right now. It feels like, you know, it was very, very eerie. It was a happy, sad kind of thing. We didn't know when the next time we would be able to step in a ring and do what we love and see all of our friends and all of that. But try to make the most of it while we were there, kind of thing.
Have you been keeping in touch with everyone?
I mean, sure, yeah, through social media, yeah. Some people more than others. I'm a pretty introverted person, so I'm not always talking to everyone all the time. But yeah, generally speaking, everyone's been keeping tabs through the Twitter timeline and all that.
When you guys were doing the show, I mean, it doesn't sound like you guys were really concerned about as far as like, oh, could I possibly get this or anything like that. What safety precautions were taken, if any at all?
They were very minimal because, believe it or not, deathmatch company GCW doesn't take a ton of safety precautions. Like, I know that I personally took precautions. Like, from then to now, I won't leave the house without a face mask. I won't touch anything without washing my hands or using disinfectant or something like that. Other than that, the only precaution was that the building we were in was limited to, legally speaking, how many people were allowed in it. So it was entirely invite only. Like, you couldn't bring your girlfriends or boyfriends or whatever. You couldn't bring like some friends or wrestling students. It was very strict on who was actually allowed to show up, which very weird for GCW because normally it's like a big hangout. You know, it's almost like a big barbecue or a big get together every time we run a show. So running on a skeleton crew like that was very abnormal.
Wow. You know, you hear about from the athletes themselves. Not to say you're not an athlete, but you know, from the competitors themselves.
Oh God, I'm not an athlete.
It's very different. But how does it affect the referee?
It's weird getting into it. You know, like, it's almost like at times you're going through the motions of this performance without being able to jump fully into it because, like, you don't have everything that's normally around you to immerse yourself, you know? That wasn't as much of a problem with GCW because, like, it didn't feel as much of a pantomime then because of the fact that we were live on IWTV broadcasting, and the guys that you're in the ring with are going 110%, and there was a handful of people around the ring. Like, if your match wasn't up yet, you were around the ring. So, like, kind of like what you're seeing on AEW every week. And so there was a little bit of something there that I was able to get into a lot more easily than if it was just your standard studio taping, you know?
Right. Well, so obviously you work GCW. I know you work some different promotions as well. MLW, Shikara, and Impact as well, correct?
Yes. Well, formerly Impact. I left there in December after 2 years.
Got it. Am I missing anyone? Or?
You know, on the indies, I work anywhere and everywhere I can. Like, there's a lot of great places. Like, Flying V Fights out in Maryland, they're a theater company that are putting on pro wrestling events, and they're one of the best organized promotions I've ever worked with. I've always tried to approach everything I do and involved within pro wrestling from a non-pro wrestling perspective. When I say I don't mean I'm discarding pro wrestling, I'm just trying to widen my perception of it. Like, I don't just look at things in terms of like a shine, a cutoff, a heat, a hope, a comeback, a go home. I try to look at it in terms of theatrically, through literature, through music, because it's all storytelling to me. And I think there's great things that you can take from all of that.
Do you have a theater background?
A little bit. I did stage crew throughout, like, my entire school experience. So, like, I wasn't theatrically performing, but I was very close to all of it and watching it and just seeing how it all worked. And I have a deep appreciation for it. And, you know, Primetime Pro Wrestling out in Washington, D.C. is running these awesome sold-out events, like, every month. Yeah, there's a bunch, and I'm sure I'm neglecting a few accidentally, like 01 USA Northeast up in New England, run by one of my best friends, Anthony Green. Locker Room Detectives, which isn't a wrestling promotion per se, but we do put on wrestling matches occasionally. It's a web series that I co-created with Mark Adam Haggerty, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
That.
Oh, I definitely want to talk about that.
We'll definitely get into that. But, you know, talking about, obviously you work for so many different promotions here. What are the differences between them all? Do they each have, like, a different style they want you to work as a ref?
Oh, absolutely, and I appreciate you asking that, because I don't think that's something that most people would necessarily even stop to think about, because I know personally I didn't until like the reality of it. Like I realized what I was doing, that every promotion you work is there's a slightly different variance of what's expected of you and how you're performing. For instance, in the ring at Impact and MLW is incredibly similar because they both are television products, but their aesthetic is very much a super indie style of high spots before rules, which I'm not criticizing. That's just a style, a preference. It's neither right nor wrong. So like you're very much let everything go by and be loose about implementing the rules and things like that at Impact MLW, versus a Chikara where it's more about personality, and I'm able to ham it up a bit with my reactions and things like that, versus a GCW, which is very super indie in the sense that they don't really care about rules. They even edge more towards like the ECW style of no rules. But when you strip the theatrical rules, because like the rules are fake, there aren't any rules. Wrestling isn't a sport. It's just we're there referee. I know it's shocking. We're referees. Our purpose is we create the illusion of rules to keep the illusion that what we're doing is a sport. And at GCW, once that's stripped from it, because there are no rules, even in like the kayfabe sense, other than pinfall or submission, there are a lot of real life practical rules that involve the safety of the opponents, of the workers. Because when you're doing death matches, it's a given that if something can go wrong in a death match, it will, whether it's a spot or a bump or anything. And sometimes it just goes wrong and you need to think quickly on your feet and figure out a replacement or go to the next thing. And sometimes something goes wrong and there's a injury that could range from tape it up and continue to we need to stop the match. So there's a huge balance, and every promotion you step into, what's expected of you is going to be different in terms of what you need to focus on.
People don't really realize that. I think a lot of fans, they just think the referee is just there to count the 1, 2, 3, and claim the victor. But you have a lot of responsibility in that ring, and being someone that's so young too. I mean, is that like added pressure for you?
For me, no. At this point in my life, not at all. It's something I enjoy because I'm 27 and I started when I was 15. So early on, absolutely, that was a huge pressure for me. I remember shortly before my first match, it was at Force One Pro Wrestling, the school that I trained at. I started in 2007. This would have been in the spring, summer of 2008. And before that first match, one of the trainers it was a guy who took himself very seriously, and he pulled me aside and was explaining to me how the wrestlers' lives are in your hands as the official, and he was very solemn about that. And like I laughed because it was so over the top dramatic, and he was like, "I'm serious." And I don't think he did a good job of explaining it, but I don't want to put the blame on him. It was more an issue of my maturity, not being able to take something seriously as a 15-year-old child.
As a normal 15-year-old would.
Yeah, but it's scary. Like I remember one of the first real brushes of that came when I was 15. One of the best ways to go through anything, I think, is a trial by fire. Like if it doesn't scare you off, it really does help forge an ability in you and a determination to get through it. And I was the only referee on just a series of small events throughout South Jersey. And we had like a gimmick. It was Steve the Teacher versus Tommy Force. And Tommy was one of my early mentors who took me around a lot of places, got me a lot of work. And Steve went to the top rope and he took an ill-advised bump and he landed on his head and he was knocked loopy. And there was supposed to be like a weapon involved with the finish, and I was supposed to miss something and hit it. And it all went wonky, and Steve was concussed, so he wasn't able to get through it. And as a 15-year-old, I came up with a very, very basic replacement spot on the fly of how we could make this work, achieve the same goals and all of that. And I remember it wasn't even like a thing of, okay, we need to do that. It was just me just going on autopilot and knowing, okay, this was what we need to get to. How can we do that? And, figuring it out on the fly. And everyone in the back was hugely complimentary of me. It was one of my first times that I went to the back and everyone kind of rallied around me and everyone was like, giving me a pat on the back or a high five. And that kind of quick thinking has helped me a lot in my career, just being able to come up with
Do you remember what the save
alternative
was?
plans under pressure.
Do you remember what that save was in that moment?
So he was presented with a chalkboard eraser that was spray painted gold, and the idea was that it was like his like a cherished trophy for like years of teaching or whatever. Like was the joke, and I was somehow supposed to be distracted. This match actually is on YouTube if you look. Steve the Teacher versus Tommy Force. I was distracted, and when Steve got knocked out, somehow he accidentally kicked the eraser into the crowd, so he didn't have access to it. And I had directed him to use a textbook that he had brought to the ring instead of that. And they did a thing where I believe Tommy brought him up for a suplex. Steve hit him with like a back suplex. Steve hit him with the textbook in the head in a way that blocked me from seeing it. I hit the 3, and realizing that that wasn't like the intended finish or something, I turned to the crowd and picked up the textbook. I was like, did he hit this? And, they all popped like, yeah, he hit it. And I reversed the decision. It was something to that extent.
Oh, I mean, yeah, still brought up the same exact effect as how it was planned. Just a little
exactly,
bit
yeah.
Now, obviously, you've reffed a lot of matches, different promotions. Can you necessarily rank your top matches, your top favorite matches that you've done?
Sure. So it's funny. I'm actually sitting right in front of a spreadsheet right now. I've kept this since I was 15 years old of every single match I've ever refereed. So I've refereed as of today 2,342 matches, and
wow. No big deal.
I'm sure that there's plenty. I'm sure there's some that I'd be leaving out. But like when I think about big matches I've refereed, the first ever singles encounter, and to my understanding, probably the only one was Rey Mysterio versus Low-Ki at Jersey All Pros anniversary event a few years ago. That was incredible. Starting to watch wrestling very seriously in the early 2000s, like Rey, of course, is going to be one of my heroes. And being a Northeast indie guy growing up, Low-Ki is one of my heroes. So it's like right now, like everyone works together. It feels like if you're in NXT, like it wouldn't be shocking to see what Evolve and then to see what Impact or whatever, But back then, everything was very separate. Like if you were at WWE, we were not seeing you at this company, and to see like a crossover event, I guess you could call it, like that. Like for me, that was really special. My first pay-per-view main event, Moose versus Austin Aries with Impact at Slammiversary, that was really special. Sami Callihan versus Tessa Blanchard was enormously special, and for me, that was the top most important match I've ever been with my entire career.
Oh man!
Because of not only did Sami have a big influence in my career, helping train me, helping me get out there. Like I don't even know if I'd be in the wrestling business if not for Sami.
Wow!
But it was a pay-per-view main event. It was for the World Championship, and it was the first ever mainstream pay-per-view to have an intergender match. And anyone who knows me knows that equality and civil rights are things that are very important to my core as a human. And even though it's just pro wrestling, and even though it's just a microcosm of all of the other discrimination that's happening in society against people because of who they are, where they're from, how they're born, or whatever, just knowing that pro wrestling was able to just overcome just that one little hurdle and become just a little bit more progressive and a little bit more inclusive was really awesome. And being able to be there firsthand for it was really special. If I could just add one more, it would be being asked to referee Gail Kim's retirement match against Tessa earlier that year. That was also a enormously special match to me. Like, those are the things that doesn't matter which way your career goes. Like, those are things nobody can ever take away from you,
No, not at all. Especially, going back to Tessa Blanchard and Sami Callihan, that's historic in wrestling. So
absolutely.
Everyone's going to remember that moment, and I'm sure Tessa Blanchard's not going to be the last. I hope she's not to accomplish something like this. But the fact that were able to raise her hand as the victor in that, and for her to have that championship moment. That's huge.
Actually, it wasn't. I'm sorry, it wasn't. Maybe I misspoke. This was right before Tessa won the belt. This was when it was Tessa versus Sami. It wasn't. Did I say it was World Championship? My bad. No, but it was the first ever intergender main event in a pay-per-view. Sami versus Tessa, and Sami actually went over against expectation. Everyone thought Tessa was going to, which I thought, dramaturgically speaking, was an even better story to tell. That everyone is rallying around this feel-good moment, and this big nasty character takes it away from her, and the whole time he was trying to prove that he was better than her. And by virtue of the fact that she was able to keep up with him, even though she lost, Sami's victory was very Pyrrhic in the sense that proved what Tessa was saying was right, that she could hang. And eventually, by the time she won the belt, that was right after I left. Impact. So unfortunately, I wasn't there for that moment. But being able to see that she won it all was also a huge thing. That just like as a friend from the sidelines is something I supported a lot.
No, absolutely. Now, you talked about Sami Callihan as far as him helping you get into this industry. You wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for him. Can you dive a little bit more into that? Can you tell us exactly, how that came to be, what happened there?
Sure. So I had my first match when I was 15, and that was a few months after I started. I had started in the fall of 2007 at a local pro wrestling company 20 minutes from my house. I saw their event, and I fell in love with it. I was still in that smart mark phase where it's like anything independent is inherently better than the mainstream, And the only independent wrestling I saw, this was like before YouTube really was as big of a thing as it is. The only independent wrestling I saw was like the Ring of Honor DVD releases and things like that. I heard about this show 20 minutes from my home in Egg Harbor, New Jersey, and I go there and I love it, and I go home and I immediately scour their MySpace page and their WordPress website and soaking in all this information about all of these wrestlers I'd never heard of, for the most part, figuring out who they were, what they were about. And eventually I saw a post advertising ring crew and like a street team. They needed help with like putting out flyers, setting up chairs, things like that. And, as a child, I was the kid whose identity was informed and built upon the fact that I was a pro wrestling fan. I had all the toys. I watched all the DVDs. I read all of the books and the magazines, played the games. And I know that in everyone's story, there's always this moment of just complete fate that just by complete happenstance, they're able to join the pro wrestling industry. And I was like, oh, this is mine. This is my moment right here. And I went to the school and met Tommy Cairo, who ran the school, he's an old ECW name from like 93, 94. He was the first one to have a Singapore cane match. And he brought me in and he showed me his booking. He had like a notepad of future shows and results and what he had planned and sponsorships and stuff. And was just like giving me a rundown. And I was just like, oh my God, this is amazing, And I was there for a few months. I had my first match. I trained there, and eventually, I took some time off for high school. High school got in the way. I was sick. By then, I was
stupid
16.
School, right? Come on.
Yeah, right. Dumb stuff that doesn't matter. And after taking maybe 8 or 9 months off, I saw that Force One had come under new ownership, and one of the students that I didn't help train him per se, but right was when as I was going out, he was coming in, and I had showed him how to take a bump and things like that, and then he was getting involved with owning it, and that was Johnny Calzone, and that was a guy who just took to the business like a natural with not only working matches but understanding the actual business end of things. And Sami Callihan was brought in as the booker, and I started showing up again because I was no longer a burden that needed to be driven around. I had gotten my learner's permit. I could take my first car or whatever around to shows, and Sami just took a liking to me. He said that it was because I knew etiquette, which is just I wasn't an idiot. I was respectful and which isn't to say that I wasn't an idiot. I totally was an idiot and oftentimes still am. There's so many mistakes I've made and continue to make, but I was trying, and he appreciated that, and he started putting me on events. And he started taking me to shows with him throughout New York and Maryland and Pennsylvania. And prior to that, I had never left the state of New Jersey in professional capacity. I had never worked outside events. And here I was, and Sami Callihan was the one who taught me how to pump my own gas. Because, in Jersey, we don't do that. I had never had to do that before.
One of the benefits of living in Jersey, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I love that. I absolutely adore that. And he took me to a handful of promotions, including 2CW. I was able to work with Hacksaw Jim Duggan, who was the first real legend I worked with. And he was awesome. He was literally in the ring in the middle of the match giving me psychology lessons and teaching me why he was doing everything he was doing as he was doing it. And it was such an incredible learning experience. Okay, ref, now I'm going to need you to bring me over here. And, okay, I'm going to ask you to check me, ref. And we're doing this so we can bring the crowd back down a bit again so they don't get too tired so I can bring them back up. And, he was just, just talking to me normally about business as usual, what he was doing. And for him, that's just, another day. But for me, it was wow, like this is wild. Like not only am I talking to Hacksaw, but I'm getting this incredible masterclass on, psychology and all of that and match structure. And one of my favorite matches I refereed from that era was Sami Callihan versus Rich Swann versus Pac versus Brody Lee, which is on YouTube, which is like what a star-studded.
Yeah, I was about to say.
If you look it up, like it's incredible. Like I have this big I'm Jewish by ethnicity, so like anytime my hair grows out long, it like turns this big Jew fro, and like I looked wild. Fans would always like catcall at me and call me like Screech and Shaggy, things like that. But like that match, it still holds up. It's awesome. It's funny. I spoke to Rich Swann for the first time in a while, right after he left WWE and when he joined Impact. And he was telling me even when he was in WWE, when he was feeling down about where he was at or opportunities he was getting or whatever, he would go back and would watch that match on YouTube, and it would kind of reignite that passion of like, this is what wrestling can be. This is what I can do. This is what I can bring to the table. And other than that, there's a lot of great ones. There's another really fun 3-way with Sami. It's also on YouTube. I uploaded it. Sami versus Rich Swann versus Alex Colon, and like that was like the crew of people who drove around and I traveled with a lot. And like 3 friends in there having a match, like the match they want to have, and being able to work it with them and learn from them, and it was incredible. It was invaluable. And Sami took me eventually to CZW. It was my first time working in the ECW arena, first time working in CZW, which was, despite what CZW has become or what it always was, it was at the time the biggest opportunity that I ever had professionally in wrestling. And it led to so many great things. It led me to meeting so many great people from there. And, I've talked to this about people, and maybe my career would have turned out the same way. Maybe it would have been, slowed down. Maybe it wouldn't have happened at all if it wasn't for Sami. And I can't say for sure, but either way, I'm so extremely grateful for him intervening in my life to lead it towards, to let it come out the way it has.
No, it sounds like, yeah, I mean, that led to so many different opportunities for you, and obviously to the road that you're on right now. Now, you were on the road with him quite a bit, and you were a minor at that time. How were your parents with that?
So by the time I was on the road with Sami, it wasn't until I was like just 18.
Okay.
Prior to that, anytime I was on the road, it was always with Tommy Force, and my parents were fine with that because like they had met Tommy, and Tommy doesn't wrestle anymore. He was a worker in the 90s he was an Iron Mike Sharp student who was like the premier trainer in New Jersey throughout the mid to late 90s, and they were always fine with that because Tommy Force is like the most like the kindest, most straight-laced, old-school guy you could ever think of. So because of the fact that I would only ever travel with him to like local events that were no more than an hour away, they were fine with it. So like, and that was probably a big part of why I took a break from like when I was in high school, for like, it was like cumulatively less than a year, but just because like my parents were going to be driving me around, I wasn't to like all these like weird wrestling shows, and I wasn't, I'm way out in like Atlantic City, and there weren't a ton of workers around me that I could just meet up with. Like, hey, let me just meet up with this 15-year-old kid to get him a ride to wrestling shows. Right. Like looking back, it's all so strange, but it all seems so normal at the
time. That's I think a perfect description of wrestling. It's just also weird, but so normal at the same time.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what age you are.
Yeah, it's a weird thing that we do. Like Emil J, he's a good friend of mine in the wrestling business. He's a ring announcer and commentator at CZW and GCW and a handful of others. And he lives 20 minutes away from me, right in Brigantine. So we hang out a lot. And I've known him since I was a teenager as well. And we were on a show together right before everything went wild, maybe a month or so back. And we traveled together very frequently. And we were just kind of standing in the locker room, and he like Iggy's me, and he's like, you ever just like stop and like it's very easy to take for granted everything since we've all been doing it so long, but like just stop and like look around and see all of the strange things that are happening and all of the bizarre interactions and what people are doing, and try to like put that in context of how weird that is, like for society in general. And he goes, I want you to do that for now. He's like, I do that every show. I want you to start doing that as well. And since then I've been trying to, and it's just, it's easy to be escaped by the fact that wrestling is weird. It's like that meme. There's a meme that was going around on Facebook through like the wrestling circle of talking about how in Tiger King, Joe Exotic might not sound as, and he might not look as crazy to you as he does to the public at large because of the fact that you're in wrestling, and he kind of just completely fits that mold, you know?
He'd be a mid-carder. He'd be a mid-carder for sure.
Exactly. Like, I don't know, man. Joe Exotic's a star. He's a star. But like, yeah, like there's so many things that you just take for granted because like of where we come from, but like it's objectively so weird.
No, but that's what makes it so much fun, though, I think.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean,
absolutely. Variety's the spice of life.
Imagine if wrestling was just normal.
That would suck. I would hate that. That'd be awful.
Exactly. You know, eventually things are going to get back to normal. Hopefully sooner rather than later. You know, but obviously there's a lot of economic repercussions that real world companies are facing, but so is professional wrestling. Some question marks are going to be there. Like, you know, is every promotion going to open back up? Can they? And, you know, even like the bigger ones, they're talking about letting some people go. Is there any concern about that at all for you or from amongst your peers right now?
There's a lot of uncertainty. And of course it's concerning, but I think a lot of us are trying to not think about the things that we can't control. You know what I mean? Right. And because it's also unprecedented. Like we could speculate all day. And like after that first Wednesday when things got really weird, I remember talking to people and my forecast was like, I mean, I think this will probably be like a 2 to 6 week thing at most. And everyone was like, yeah, that sounds about right. And then just like it just keeps, it's just so unprecedented, you know? The closest thing we had to this is maybe 9/11 because the entire country at large is affected by the same awful thing at once. But, you know, even with 9/11, like the immediate effects of it had dissipated within a week. And obviously there's still things that we're feeling to this day with tightened airport security and things like that. But it's just so unprecedented and such a thing that you would never think has even happened to you that it's just like, I know me personally, I'm just trying to take it as one day at a time. I'm not even trying to make the mistake of forecasting anything. I'm just seeing where it goes and doing what I can to go with the
there's like no strings and like, you know, Post-its around in your room or anything like that, right? No conspiracy theories?
Not at all.
You're not there yet. Okay.
No. I have passing like a casual interest in conspiracy theories, but not like as someone who believes in them, just more like, oh, I find this like an interesting train of thought. Like I write for Ripley's Believe It or Not, and I love going down weird rabbit holes all the time. But more often than not, I am a passive observer more so than I am a follower when it comes to that sort of thing.
All right, good. Well, maybe we'll give it one more week then with that. So I want to talk a little bit more about, you know, what you do as a referee here. You know, obviously there are a lot of referees, and you've definitely made a name for yourself. And how does one stand out as a referee?
Well, if you were to ask, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Ox Baker, but he was a legendary worker from the 50s and 60s who did the heart punch as a finish. And he was, if you ever watched Escape from New York, he fights Kurt Russell like in a wrestling ring in that movie. And I was working with Ox a lot toward the end of his life when he would just be like the visiting legend at PWS because he lived locally. And his mind was a bit addled and he wasn't completely all there, but he would come backstage and have fun. And I didn't know what it would give me, but he was like a guy who had been doing this like since before my parents had been born. So I decided to ask him his advice for being successful as a referee, just to hear what he had to say. And his advice was, he was like, you gotta do something like when you count, raise your hand and shake it a bit, just like make yourself stand out. And anathema to everything I'd been taught as a referee, which is like you don't want to be noticed and all of that. So I just kind of chalked it up to like a difference in time. Like in his generation, that was what was okay. And, you know, things have changed. So just thanked him for his time. And I walked away, and then he came up to me like 20 minutes later, and he's like, "Hey, kid." And mind you, he's like in his 80s. And he's like, "Hey, kid, are you athletic?" And I'm like, "I'm not really." But like just for the sake of conversation, I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Can you do a backflip?" And I was like, "Maybe." And he goes, "Next time you're on a show, like a little one, it doesn't matter. When they do the finish, I want you to climb up to the second rope, and I want you to hit a backflip and count to 3 count, okay?" I was like, "You got it, sir."
Oh my gosh.
And like
that's how you stand out in a bad way.
Yeah, like he was like totally ribbing me, you know, and like Sammy brought that story up to me. We were in Mexico City like last year, and he brought that story up to me, and just like but so my experience was I've never been a person who craves the spotlight. I'm not it's funny, like a lot of the endeavors I involve myself with, like with writing, with wrestling, with locker room detective stuff, it benefits you to have that audience watching, but that's not necessarily something I've always concerned myself with. I always did stage crew in school, we were talking about earlier, because I like being in the background. I don't need that much attention. And as a referee, someone who doesn't need that attention is going to be successful because you are an auxiliary player and your role is to support the story that's being told in the ring. And if you are too flamboyant or too ostentatious or anything, it's going to be a distraction. And for me, being the fact that we were talking about earlier, how I like to take outside sources, I like to look at how I spend a lot of time thinking about how I could contribute to matches more so than just the standard, the helping the illusion of it, that sport, facilitating communication, making sure everyone's safe, things like that. And I was thinking of how, like, as a dramatically speaking, we're there to enhance what's happening. So I took the theory of, if you ever spent any time around like a toddler, and like toddlers just fall all the time because they're dumb. That's what toddlers do. And they'll fall and they'll look at you and their reaction will be kind of confusion at the fact that they fell. It's like they gauge their response to how you're responding. So if you're freaking out about the fact that they fell, they'll start crying. If you're like, hey, you're fine, get up, they'll be like, oh, okay, I'm fine, and get up. And I think the audience looks at referees the same way, because we are a third party that's in the ring, that's not taking directly involved with the action. Like, we're not getting, at least usually, we're not getting thrown around and all of that, but we are reacting to what's happening. And if I'm treating everything like it's wild, then nothing is wild. If I keep a very, subtle, stoic, professional, face on, and all of a sudden something happens and I I express concern or shock or outrage, then it helps sell that, because it's like, oh, he's not normally like that, like, it's like when they say when you're on an airplane, if you see the normally stoic flight attendants panicking, then there's something wrong. And I try to do that. And just me as a person, I have a very expressive face with my eyes and my mouth. That's just who I am. That's not, and I decided I could take that and insert that in select places to help enhance the story. And it, part of it was just nature of how I am. Part of it was, I think this will add to it. And it seems like a lot of people are fond of it. I get a lot of fans who approach me and tell me that they have a lot of fun with my facial reactions or things like that. But it's always like caution with, like, you're not like being so much that you're taking away from the show. You're just adding a bit to it, which means a lot to me, because I'm in a position that referees don't always get that opportunity to add so directly to the enjoyment of someone's experience, and even if it's in a minor way. And like, I know it's always very hit or miss with people. Like, if you were to talk to one of my mentors, Jason Ayers, he's a WWE official, he'll tell you all day that it's way too over the top for the style that WWE does, which is fine. Because if I was at WWE, I wouldn't do that style. Like we were saying earlier, you curtail it towards who you're working for. When I was at Impact, it was very hit or miss, because like, I remember one time Bob Ryder, who he was working Go position, which was Impact's version of Gorilla, like right before you go out, he pulled me aside and he was like, hey, like, tone down the facial expressions. And then one of the agents pulls you aside and says, hey, for this next match, like, this is going to be wild, like, be wild with it. And it's like, I have these conflicting directions. I don't know what to do.
What do you do at that point then? Okay,
so this was the second ever Thanksgiving Day match that I did with Impact. And I guess I'll rewind just a little bit. The first week that I was brought into Impact, it was November of 2017. All of the referees had been let go or chosen to leave. So it was a whole new team pretty much, except for Johnny Bravo, who's the only one who had stayed involved. And he was like, at the time, the junior most official, and all of a sudden he's the senior official. Myself and Brandon Toll and Harry D were brought in that first week in Ottawa, and it was Bound for Glory. And we did like a week of tapings, and like on the second day or third day, they did the Impact I'm blanking on the name. I know they changed the name when I was there to like the Eli Drake Turkey Trot, but prior to that, like, they had done a stipulation mostly every year, where there would be a big gimmick match, usually like a multi-man match, sometimes a singles, where whoever lost would have to wear the turkey suit. And after the first day or two, Abyss just kind of took to me, and he saw that I was just animated and expressive, and he came up to me, and he was an agent at the time, and he told me that he felt I'd be the best choice because I was the best like actor of that group to referee that match. And like nobody was treating this match like a priority at all. Like it was very much like, okay, this is our like the segment's a day off. Like we don't even care about anything. Just like go out. No, this is for the Thanksgiving episode. Barely anyone watches. Just guys, just go out, do some gaga, have some fun. And they decided to rib me, which was so I'm holding the turkey. I was told to go out there and hold the turkey suit, and I was just told by everyone, like, be completely stoic. You need to treat this with, like, the sense of gravitas as if you're holding the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. Like, you need to be really serious about that. And, I mean, if someone tells me that I'm going to do it. And I went out there, and during the intros and stuff, like, the most you might ever have to hold, like, a belt or a trophy or whatever would probably be in the range of 3 to maybe 5 minutes on the high end. And I don't know if it was just because of all the entrances, it was because of commercial breaks, and it was because they were having fun in the back. But like I ended up holding this turkey suit for legitimately 15 minutes.
Oh my God.
And they were in my ear trying to break me, like, you know, trying to like make me laugh or smile, and I just wouldn't do it. You know, like when I'm out there, I'm out there. I'm not going to do that. And they started feeding me cues of like goofy things to do with the turkey suit because I had my hand propped up through the head to hold it up, but I also gave me the ability to use it like it was a puppet. So like I started like anytime a heel would come by me while I was holding it, like I would peck at them, and I would like just like silently have the turkey's head like turning around and looking at people and like watching the heels go back and forth and things like that. And everyone was just, they were cracking up. So eventually it came, the next year was the second one of those. And it was the first time I'd ever seen in a script where they had written in who was to referee the match. Because usually we just figured it out every day, like every morning, day of, we would get with an agent and figure it out. And it said that they specifically wanted me to do it. And Bob had said like, hey, you need to tone that stuff down. And then someone else had said like, hey, you need to like this is like your time like to be a goofball kind of. And I decided it was one of those times it was better to ask for forgiveness than permission. So I just kind of went all out, and like it was such a gimmicky match. I was doing spots, and I remember it was at the time when Scarlett Bordeaux, before she was wrestling there, and she was coming out to the ring, and like the gimmick was if she came out, everything had to stop because like it would be like a cartoon, like your jaw falls to the floor and like you're drooling over her. And a lot of times pro wrestling makes the mistake of they give you so I won't say it makes the mistake. They give you very little instruction, and it's like, okay, you just need to be distracted by her. Now, that's a very vague direction, be distracted. And there's a lot of ways you can take that. And it's one of those things where if you take it the right way, cool, you did okay, that's exactly how it's supposed to go. If you take it the wrong way, it's your fault because you decided to take it in a different direction even though you weren't given clarity. And I just decided to be an over-the-top maniac about it. And like I climbed on the ropes, like I had my mouth open, my tongue was hanging out. I was just being ridiculous, absurd, you know, like a wolf in like a Looney Tunes cartoon. And I remember I got in my ear, and I was like, I didn't necessarily plan to do it. A lot of things, it's just like, I know I'm going to react, and then it's just what felt right in the moment. And in my ear, all of a sudden, they buzz in and they say, hey, keep doing that. We're going to get a close-up on you. And which is wild because, like, that doesn't happen. And they had a big close-up on me acting like a maniac and all of that. And I'm, like, pulling at my collar and all that, like, wiping sweat from my forehead, going nuts. And we get to the back, and Bob pulls me aside, and I'm like, oh, God.
Right.
And he goes, hey, remember what I told you about toning down the facial expressions out there? And I go, yes, sir. And he goes, forget I ever said it. Keep doing you.
Oh, that's amazing.
And, yeah, and it works.
I mean, you put her over big time by doing that.
Yeah, I was just trying to have fun with it all, and it was fun. A lot of people put me in the category of being like more of a gimmicky ref, which it's funny because I never sought out to be a gimmick ref. I've always appreciated the work of more straight-laced officials, like discounting his heel run, but like my favorite is like Nick Patrick. I think if pro wrestling was real, that's what a referee would look like, and that's how they would act. John Cohn is another one who's an incredible official. And I've always patterned myself after these straight-laced officials, and just sometimes, my weird personality slips out a bit, and it's something I'm happy to tone down if need be, but it seems like a lot of people like it, so
no, it's
fun.
definitely working, right? That's the thing. I mean, especially now, there's no written rule per se. I think what automatically helps a person shine is when they're true to themselves. And that's branding right there. When you're yourself, that's your brand.
Yeah.
So, and no one else can take that away from you.
Yeah, exactly. I just try to be me, and I have a warped sense of humor. I'm silly and irreverent. There's a lot of weird things that I have high interest in, and by weird things I mean like the things I write about. Like 99% of the time, my articles are based off of two things. Whenever I write articles, Ripley's or for Wrestling Inc. or whatever, it's rather I come across a story that I feel like I have a unique insight toward, or I want to present in my own way. Or if I have a question that I can't find the answer to immediately, I start doing the research and I just turn into an article. One of the most read articles I ever did was Mexico's most notorious serial killer, responsible for upward of 50 homicides, was a woman who was a professional wrestler. She was a luchadora. And I did an article on that, which is what caught Ripley's attention. I did a version of that, and I've been working with them for about 2 years now.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, just like weird things like that, you wouldn't think of. Because my thought was when you read that, every single article I found, it always mentioned her wrestling career, but as a gimmicky thing, like, oh yeah, and she was a wrestler by day and murderer by night, but it didn't talk about her wrestling career. And I started thinking, what does a serial killer's wrestling career look like? So I started exploring that. I started talking to people who worked with her to dig into her backstory. So yeah, I'm just authentically my weird self.
I think that's amazing. It's clearly working out. Now you mentioned before about locker room detectives.
Yes.
I definitely want to dive into this. So, it's you and Mark Adam Haggerty.
Yes.
Brilliant mind for the business. Someone who actually knows a lot about marketing.
Absolutely. Mark right now, he actually has a 90-minute a social media seminar that he normally goes around the country doing these, and he put it online for people to buy, and it's been getting rave reviews. It's awesome. It's a great, if you want to learn how to market yourself and how to use social media in a way that's beneficial to you, that's beneficial not just for wrestlers, it's beneficial for anyone in today's world.
Yeah,
he's a genius with that.
Say that. Yeah, it's good for anyone to learn how to do, especially if you're an entrepreneur, you're just starting your own business. And I would like to say, we're freelancers, and it's very much marketing right there and social media. It's definitely important to know and put the mind of a genius at it like Mark Adam Haggerty. So obviously that helps, having someone like that work with you for locker room detectives. Can you tell us how this came to be?
So the first time I met Mark, we had met in passing a few times, but when he joined Chikara, he didn't really know much of anyone, and we did Chikara a few times. And again, it's not that I'm not friendly. It takes me a while to warm up to people. And we did a small indie show after he joined Chikara, and Mark had this plan to turn us into friends, where he went up to a photographer and was like, hey, capture a photo of Chris and I if you can. And that night we would just start joking around and goofing around while I was in the ring and while he was ring announcing during entrances, while we're waiting for people. And it was that first night that we really started interacting that I don't know who, but one of us made a joke that we should start a 70s detective series where we solve mysteries in locker rooms that really don't need to be solved. And we were talking about minor things, like someone's elbow pad is missing or they can't find wrist tape before they go out. And it was just a joke. And then someone Mark took the photo that someone had taken and he put it online, and he left a really nice caption about working with me. And it was probably to date one of the last nice things Mark has ever said about me.
So hold that to your heart.
Yeah, as best friends are wont to do. But we started talking about more and more, and then we had a long road trip, and not long after that to Chicago. And I'm always about carpooling with people to save money on gas and whatnot, get to know each other better, learn something about the business, have fun. And I asked him who he wanted to go with. If he wanted to go with me, he said yeah. And he was like, I don't know anyone. Could you pick a couple people? that you think would be like cool to ride with. And I ended up asking Still Life with Apricots and Pears and Icarus. And we started a group chat. That was like a year and a half ago, and we started a group chat from that, and it never, like, we still talk into it every day. It like built lifelong friendships. And up and back, we were joking about, you know, like what we could do with this show. Like, could we actually make it? And then like we started talking about more and more. And then eventually Chikara was doing like a private event in Esopus, New York, which was like a long drive away, like upstate New York. And it was like in this beautiful, like a park almost. And I was like, yo, we have so much of an opportunity to like shoot something unique here, because like when do we ever get the opportunity to be in Esopus, New York, in this all this beautiful green? Let's film, like we always talk about, let's actually film it. And we didn't really know what we were doing, and not much has changed, but we just we went there and we just like filmed a goofy thing, and like we didn't even know the plot until that car ride up, which is a lot of times that's true for a lot of episodes. We'll just take a long trip and we'll look at where we're going to be and who's going to be there with us and think, what can we do that's silly? Like one episode, we were at a baseball stadium, and Mark, he always uses like a Juul, like one of those vape things, like not pen, but like you know, those Juul carts. And he's a maniac, and he always loses it every few minutes. And a lot of times it's just because I hide it from him to see him panic. So we decided to like do an entire episode about that. And then other times like we'll come up with something really high concept. Like we recently, I don't want to give too much away, but we just finished filming a remote episode where everyone is locked in their home. And you saw the social distancing match at DCW with Jimmy Lloyd and Joey Janela, and we did our own spin on it called a quarantine match, which I don't want to get into it, but it was an idea, and I had in my head exactly how it would work, and it seemed ridiculous, and we filmed it, and it worked out exactly right, mercifully, and I'm really excited for how the world's going to react when we release it. But sometimes we have really abstract thoughts, or like a few weeks ago we did a wrestler's court, which the whole premise of it was didn't want to film it like a regular episode. We wanted to film it like a daytime court TV appearance, and it's like Sidney Bacabella, who was on trial for crimes he committed in our first season, and it gives us so much room just to do whatever we want. Like it's just so much variety. It can be talking, hey, Killian's here, and there's no one else we really want to film with today, but we really like Killian. Let's just hang out with him and see what happens. Killian McMurphy. Or it could be, okay, we're going to get everyone together, and we need this scene, we need that scene. There's a lot of variety. Or, I mean, we did the most ambitious thing to date we've done was our live event that we threw. We were driving home from a show, and this was probably around in the fall, and I go, hey, are we, like, doing anything for New Year's? And Mark was like, I don't know. I was like, you want to throw a party? And he's like, yeah. And I go, you want to stream it live and make it like a live episode of Locker Room Detectives? And Mark was like, yeah, but we ended up throwing it in his house, but he demanded, he's like, I want to have wrestling matches on it. And I was like, in your apartment? And he's like, yes. And I was like, I have no idea how we'll do that, but okay. And it's on YouTube if you want to watch the whole thing. And don't get me wrong, it's definitely there's definitely things that we could have, that walking away from it we know to improve. Like it's definitely rough around the edges, but like it worked. I say that shocked and completely shocked that we had it was 2 hours long, and it was a mixture of scripted and unscripted elements. So like maybe we'll start the show and we'll introduce everyone, and then they'll go to a party game. Then it'll come back and we'll find out that the bad guys, Hermit Crab and Crawdad, who weren't invited to our party because they're our arch nemesis, they somehow sneaked in. And then we catch them. And then, okay, we're going to find out how they got in. And then it cuts to an unscripted party game that was happening. And then we come back and it's like, okay, we're interrogating people. And okay, we want to keep interrogating everyone, but first it's time for a match. And all of a sudden we do a match. And like, it was like the weirdest 2-hour variety event you could ever imagine, and I loved every second of it. I can't wait to do it again. We were going to do one for 4th of July, but now everything's kind of in the air. So
hopefully that could still happen. Hopefully. We're still a little bit away from that.
A bit, yeah.
Don't do that to me. Don't tell me we're going to be here again until July.
At its core, Locker Room Detective is just people in the business having fun and letting their hair down and being goofy with one another. And you would never expect the people we get who want to play. But it's not just like our close and personal friends. Like we've gotten Scott Steiner on the show. We've gotten Nick Gage on the show. That was actually one episode where we have that one on YouTube. All of it airs on IWTV now, but our first 6 we released on YouTube. And episode 5 was How to Be a Man. And so me personally, I've always dealt with this struggle of, society has a very set standard of what it means to be a man and to be masculine. And I never really conformed to that. I'm not someone who really cares about being tough or macho or doing sports or whatever. I like to do the things I like to do. So I guess in that sense, you could say I was kind of ambivalent about any sense, like asserting my sense of gender. Like I'm a guy, but like I don't really care about these other stereotypes. And people always called me Kid Ref or Baby Ref or things like that, and I lean into it as the joke. But like I wanted to do something where it asked the very serious question of like, what does it mean to be a man? Like, how can you be a man if like everyone says it has to be this way, and that goes against what you think it should be. And in that episode, we were able to go around and get like Scott Steiner to teach me about how he thinks you should have to be a man, which according to Scott Steiner was I need to experience the nectar of woman's juices. Like he said some wild shit like that.
Oh my God.
Or like, and Nick Gage told me I needed to tear it up in the bedroom. And like, these are all things that are valid ways of being a man, but it's not the only way of being a man. And like, so we have a lot of leeway to explore things as we want to explore them. And I love that. Oh, and in the Locker Room Detectives universe, Rhino is running for president.
I hope he wins.
Oh, as of right now, yes. As of the last episode, which aired April 2nd on IWTV, he is the president-elect. But he's dealing with a scandal because footage has leaked of him pile driving a woman.
You know what? It's always footage of pile driving woman that could halt your career real fast.
And it's great because, like, the people who you expect not to care at all, like, they have the most fun with it because, like, how often does Rhino get asked to be like a goofball like that,
No, and he's funny.
He leans into it, and he loves it. Anytime we're together, we film. Or we were at a show, Primetime Pro Wrestling, and like Joey Ryan was there, and like I know him from Impact in the Indies, but like I didn't know him well enough to like ask him to be in it. And he came up to me, and he's like, "So you guys shoot some stuff? Do you want to do something?" And we ended up doing a scene with that. Just like it's fun. It's just harmless fun.
No, and I can tell from what I've seen, everyone's having a good time doing it. I mean, how can you not? It just looks like a blast in general.
Yeah, and I think that goes through the screen. I think the fact that it's so authentic. Like, I don't act. I'm not a good actor. When I referee, all I do is react with facial expressions.
Oh, acting
and on Locker Room Detectives. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's splitting hairs. But, like, if you were to give me a dramatic monologue, I'm sure I could get through it. But, like, I'm not great at that. I'm just, like, in Locker Room Detectives, it's just, I'm not being a character. I'm just being a amped up version of, like, myself. Like, Mark and I, we're both just monsters. We're just lunatics. And we just unleash that on camera and act like psychos.
Well, you guys obviously have very good chemistry. It's going a long way. Can you just tell us real fast where we can find Locker Room Detectives?
Sure. So the best contribution Mark has ever made to the series, which was a surprise to me, was we call ourselves Locker Room Detectives, and on the very first episode, he introduced our nickname as being the Locker Dicks, which anyone who's familiar with like pulp, magazines or books from the 30s knows that like Dick Tracy, it's an old school nickname for a detective, is a dick. But also throughout the show, like the strength for us is we don't need to come off strong. Since he's a ring announcer, I'm a referee. We can lose fights. We can look like idiots. We can be goofballs. We can be jerks, and it makes sense because we're locker dicks. So the first time I saw that, I realized like, oh, that's gold. And Mark didn't even tell me. He just I watched the first episode after he edited it. And it had that, and that's where you can find us on Instagram and Twitter's at LockerDicks.
Awesome. You're hanging around for last call, right?
Absolutely. Hey, this is Kid Ref Kris Levin. Thank you for listening, but we're not done yet. Stay tuned until the end of this episode for Last Call.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time I need to announce it's last call at the bar. Oh.
All right, guys, thank you for staying tuned for the end of the show. It's our favorite segment, Last Call, again here with Kris Levin. Kris, are you ready for this?
As ready as I can be.
All right. Well, starting off, which all-time favorite classic that you wish that you could have reffed?
Ooh. Okay, so off the top of my head, this might sound like a weird choice, but two of my favorite matches I'm going to say that are from the indies, actually, that aren't from anywhere too mainstream. One of them was last year at Chikara. It was in Chicago, and it was the main event. It was Boomer Hatfield versus Dasher Hatfield, who in storyline, they're father and son. And it was a mask versus mask match. And to this day, it is the best live match I've ever seen.
Wow.
It was incredible. Dasher is one of those hidden gems. He's like low-key the best guy on the indies, period. And his son, Boomer, is a prodigy. I've never seen someone just take to everything in between the ropes as well and as quickly. And so that would definitely be one of them. The other one that I would say would be years ago, Beyond Wrestling, there was a match between Eddie Edwards and Biff Busick, who Biff's in WWE now as Oney Lorcan. And they had a program there. And I believe the first match of the series I reffed, and it was awesome. They eventually concluded it in an Iron Man match, 60 minutes, and it was an awesome, awesome match. And I believe Kevin Quinn reffed it. That's another one I would love to be in there for.
Nice. What is your favorite WrestleMania moment?
It's hard to say because, like, on one hand, you know, I think back to my fandom and I think back to the first WrestleMania I ever watched live, which was WrestleMania 20. You know, like, at the time, it's such an awesome moment with Eddie and Benoit, but, you know, obviously since then it's been tainted. So I'm not sure. I'd have to think on that one.
Yeah, no problem. Which TV character do you most relate to?
You know, I'm going to go with any entertainment, not just TV. And the more I read Watchmen throughout different periods of my life, the more I relate to different characters.
Okay.
Now I'm more in a stage where I relate to Dr. Manhattan, just in the sense of sometimes I just want to be on a different planet. I just want to be away,
right?
And I just don't get other people, and like things just don't make sense to me anymore, you know?
I feel you right now.
Yeah.
Which celebrity would you mark out for if you ever met them in person?
That's weird because I'm not a... Okay, so I'm a weirdo in the sense that, like, if I met, like, a major star or something, it wouldn't be a big deal to me. But, like, if I ran to Ace Darling at the mall, I would lose my mind. Like, oh, my God, it's Ace Darling. Like, come on, ECWA. So, sure, let's go with Ace Darling.
There you go. If you had any other job, what would you do?
I mean, aside from wrestling and writing and stuff like that, there's two career paths that always really interested me that I wasn't able to pursue because of wrestling. One of them was working at sea, and I'm not really sure what I would have done. Just the idea of being at sea sounds awesome. You know, I'm from Atlantic City, so I'm right on the shore. And the other thing that I really seriously pursued was art history. And unfortunately, just like with the way my schedule is, I'm in school now for journalism, and I couldn't take the proper classes and do the proper internships and all of that if I wanted to maintain the like chaotic, wacky wrestling schedule of, hey man, I know you're coming back from a show tonight, but could you be in Canada tomorrow morning? Like, you wouldn't be able to maintain that, and I had to take wrestling for art history. So,
who was your hero growing up?
My brother. He is 8 years older than me, and so much about who I am as a person has been formed by just that time spent with him, which is funny because we're like polar opposites.
At high school, which table were you the one sitting at? Like, which type of group of people were you hanging out with?
The Misfits. Rather, the Misfits, like the dorks and geeks who didn't really have that many friends, or I would be like the one who would go into the library and like read books because I didn't have anyone to sit with. I was painfully shy and quiet and just reserved, and
then all of a sudden, boom.
Yeah. Wrestling really was what brought me out of my shell. Meeting Sami Callihan specifically, going on the road with him, that was kind of when I figured out who I was as a person, who I wanted to be.
All right, Chris. Well, thank you for joining us for Last Call. Where can they find you on social media?
At Ref Kris Levin, and that's Chris with a K because my parents are difficult.
Well, let's not throw your parents completely underneath the bus. They did a good job, man. And we look forward to seeing what you do once this quarantine is lifted. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Hey baby, I hear the bell ringing, hip tosses and body slams. Oh my. And maybe you seem a bit confused, yeah baby, but I got you pinned. Ha 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 ha. But I don't know what to do when I see them with that golden case. They're cashing it in. Authority all in my face. What is a man to do? Good night, everybody.